After hosting my in-laws rent-free for 8 months, they called me a burden. I smiled. Fine. I packed my bags and left, leaving a note. I sold the lease. New tenants move in tomorrow. They learned they lost the house for good. Yo, so picture this. I'm sitting here with my Bud Light, finally ready to spill the tea on the wildest family drama that went down last year. No cap, this story is absolutely bonkers and I'm still processing how it all unfolded. So check it out. My husband and I had been living in this sweet little rental house for about 3 years. Nothing fancy, but it was our spot, you know? We'd painted the walls, had our Netflix set up just right, and I'd even gotten pretty tight with our landlord, Mrs. Chen. She was this cool older lady who appreciated that we never caused drama and always paid rent on time. Then boom, Hurricane Katrina 2.0 hits my in-laws' town. Not literally the same hurricane, but you get the picture. Their whole neighborhood got absolutely wrecked. Insurance companies were being sketchy as usual, dragging their feet on payouts, and my husband's parents were basically homeless. Now, I'm not heartless, right? When my husband suggested they crash with us temporarily, I was totally on board. These are his parents we're talking about, the people who raised the man I love. Plus, our place had that extra bedroom we'd been using for storage and my random craft projects. I figured maybe a month, tops 2 months, while they figured out their next move. Boy, was I wrong. Month 1 was actually pretty chill. His mom, let's call her Linda, helped with cooking sometimes. His dad, Bob, was handy around the house and fixed our leaky faucet that had been driving me crazy for months. We all watched TV together in the evenings, sharing a bag of Cheetos and arguing about whether The Bachelor was rigged. It felt like family, for real. But then month 2 rolled around, and things started getting weird. Linda began rearranging our kitchen without asking. Not just moving a few things around, I'm talking full-scale reorganization. She moved my coffee maker to some random cabinet and put all my spices in alphabetical order, which sounds nice in theory but completely messed up my cooking flow. When I gently mentioned that I preferred my kitchen setup the way it was, she got this look. You know the look, that passive-aggressive mom stare that could freeze hell over. She said something like, well, I was just trying to make things more efficient for everyone. Month 3 brought the first real clash. I came home from my job at the local Target to find they'd rearranged our entire living room. Our couch, the one my husband and I had saved up for months to buy, was now against a different wall. Our TV stand was moved, and somehow they'd managed to make our 55-inch Samsung look tiny in the new setup. I kept my cool and asked what was up. Bob just shrugged and said the room had better feng shui this way. I didn't even know the man knew what feng shui was, but okay. I suggested maybe they could have asked first, and Linda jumped in with this whole speech about how they were contributing to the household and shouldn't have to ask permission for every little thing. That's when I started noticing other changes. My favorite coffee mug, this awesome ceramic one with a funny cat meme that my best friend got me, mysteriously disappeared. When I asked about it, Linda claims she'd never seen it. Later, I found it at the very back of the highest cabinet, like someone was trying to hide it. My skincare products in the bathroom got rearranged too. I had this whole routine with my Neutrogena face wash and moisturizer lined up just how I liked them. Suddenly, everything was shoved into the medicine cabinet, making room for Linda's extensive collection of anti-aging creams that probably cost more than my car payment. Month 4 was when things really started going south. I'd been working extra shifts at Target, partly because we needed the money with 4 people in the house now, and partly because the vibe at home was getting super tense. I'd come home exhausted, just wanting to crash on my own couch and watch some Netflix, but there was always some new drama. One day, I came home to find Linda had thrown away half my clothes, not donated them, straight up tossed them in the garbage. Her excuse? She was helping me declutter and thought some of my t-shirts looked too worn. These weren't raggedy clothes either. We're talking about my favorite vintage band tees and some comfy hoodies I'd had since college. When I got upset, both Linda and Bob acted like I was being unreasonable. Bob actually said I should be grateful for the help organizing my life. My husband tried to play peacekeeper, but I could tell he was feeling the pressure too. Update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support in the comments. Some of you are asking why my husband wasn't stepping up more. Trust me, that's a whole other story. But here's where things get really interesting. What would you do if you discovered your in-laws were actually planning something behind your back? Month 5 brought the discovery that changed everything. I was looking for important documents in our filing cabinet when I found papers that definitely weren't ours. Turns out Linda and Bob had been researching tenant rights and looking into how to establish residency at our address. They had printouts about squatters' rights and legal procedures for claiming occupancy of a rental property. I confronted them about it, and they didn't even try to deny it. Linda actually had the nerve to say they were just exploring their options. Since they'd been contributing to the household for months and felt they deserved some security, that's when Bob dropped the real bomb. He told me they'd already contacted our landlord, Mrs. Chen, to discuss possibly taking over the lease. They'd presented themselves as long-term tenants who could provide more stability than a young couple. I was absolutely floored. These people had been living rent-free in my home, eating my food, using my utilities, and now they were trying to steal my house right out from under me. But here's the thing that really got me. Mrs. Chen had apparently been polite but told them the lease was between her and us, and any changes would need to involve us directly. So they came back and suggested we all sign a new lease together as co-tenants. When I said absolutely not, that's when Linda's true colors really showed. She started going off about how I was being selfish and ungrateful. She said they'd been improving the house and making it more livable, so they deserved to stay. Bob jumped in saying I was clearly too immature to handle adult responsibilities anyway. The final straw came in month 6. I'd been documenting everything by this point, taking photos, keeping receipts, writing down conversations. My gut was telling me this situation was heading nowhere good. One evening, I overheard them on the phone with someone, probably their insurance company or a lawyer. Linda was describing how they'd been forced to move in with family and how they'd made significant improvements to the property that justified their right to stay. Bob was talking about how the young couple clearly couldn't handle the financial responsibility of the house and how they were more stable tenants. He actually said I was just a burden on the household and that everyone would be better off if I found somewhere else to go. That hit different, you know? I'd been busting my butt working extra hours, buying groceries for 4 people instead of 2, covering utilities that had nearly doubled, and dealing with their constant passive-aggressive comments about my life choices. And now I was the burden? I sat in my car for like an hour after hearing that, just processing. Then I went inside, smiled real sweet, and said, you know what? You're absolutely right. I am a burden, and I should definitely find somewhere else to go. Linda looked surprised, like she hadn't expected me to agree so easily. Bob just nodded like he'd won some kind of victory. That night, I started making phone calls. Month 7 was when I put my plan into motion. See, what Linda and Bob didn't realize was that Mrs. Chen and I had developed a pretty solid relationship over the years. She'd always appreciated that I took care of the place and never caused problems. More importantly, she'd been getting increasingly annoyed with Linda and Bob's attempts to go behind our backs. I explained the whole situation to Mrs. Chen, how they'd moved in temporarily after their emergency, how they'd been trying to establish residency, and how they were now actively trying to push me out of my own home. She was absolutely furious. Turns out Mrs. Chen had been planning to sell the house anyway. The real estate market was hot, and she'd been thinking about cashing out. My in-laws' shenanigans just accelerated her timeline. But here's the beautiful part. Mrs. Chen offered to sell the house to me first. She knew I couldn't afford to buy it outright, but she was willing to work out a rent-to-own arrangement that would let me build equity while keeping my monthly payments reasonable. I spent weeks getting my finances in order, talking to banks, and figuring out the legal stuff. My husband was caught in the middle, but eventually came around when he realized how manipulative his parents had been. The whole time, Linda and Bob kept escalating their behavior. They started inviting their friends over without asking, making it clear they considered the place theirs now. Linda even started introducing herself to neighbors as the homeowner when I wasn't around. They began setting rules about when I could use the kitchen, what shows we could watch on TV, and even suggested I should contribute more to groceries since I was taking up space. The audacity was absolutely mind-blowing. Update. Y'all are asking great questions about the legal side of this. Let me clear some things up. Everything I did was totally above board, and I had lawyers involved every step of the way. But wait until you hear what my in-laws tried to pull next. Should I have seen this coming? Month 8 was when everything came to a head. Linda and Bob had started acting like they owned the place completely. They'd even gone so far as to give Mrs. Chen's contact information to their friends, telling people they were the landlords now and could provide references. Mrs. Chen called me absolutely livid after getting a call from some random person asking about Bob's rental property. That's when she told me she'd already processed all the paperwork for our rent-to-own agreement and was ready to move forward immediately. The timing was perfect, because Linda and Bob chose that exact week to deliver their ultimatum. They sat me down in my living room and told me they'd decided I needed to move out by the end of the month. They said they'd already talked to Mrs. Chen about taking over the lease permanently, and they were sure she'd prefer mature, responsible tenants. Bob actually said, let's be honest, you're just not ready for this kind of responsibility. Maybe you should find a nice apartment somewhere more suitable for someone your age. Linda nodded along and added, we've really improved this place since we've been here. It's time for you to find your own path. I just sat there listening to them completely rewrite history. According to their version, they'd been paying rent all along. They hadn't. They'd made major improvements to the property. They'd rearranged furniture, and I was basically a freeloader who couldn't handle adult life. That's when I smiled, really smiled, and said, you know what? You're absolutely right. I should definitely find my own path. They looked so smug and satisfied. Bob actually patted my shoulder like he was proud of me for finally seeing reason. I told them I'd start packing right away and would be out by the weekend. Linda offered to help me find a suitable place and suggested I look into those extended stay motels near the highway. Real classy, right? That Friday, I loaded up my husband's Chevy with our essential stuff. I'd been staying at my sister's place anyway, so it wasn't like I was actually homeless, but I made sure Linda and Bob saw me carrying boxes out to the truck, looking all defeated and sad. Before I left, I sat down and wrote them a note. I put it on the kitchen counter where they'd definitely see it. The note said, thank you for helping me see things clearly. You're right that I needed to take responsibility for my life. I'm happy to let you know that I've done exactly that. I finalized the purchase of this house yesterday. The deed is in my name now. You have 30 days to find new living arrangements, as outlined in the official eviction notice that's being served this afternoon. I hope you understand that I need to find tenants who can actually pay rent. Best of luck with your housing search. I left my keys on the counter next to the note and drove away. My husband called me 2 hours later, absolutely panicking. Apparently, Linda had found the note and gone completely ballistic. She'd called him screaming that I was lying, that there was no way I could have bought the house, and that she was going to call the police for fraud. Bob had immediately called Mrs. Chen, who very calmly confirmed that yes, the house had been sold, and yes, the new owner had every right to evict tenants who weren't paying rent. She also mentioned that she'd kept detailed records of all their attempts to go behind our backs and establish illegal residency. The eviction notice arrived that afternoon, delivered by a very official-looking process server. Turns out, when you're living somewhere without a lease and not paying rent, you have almost no legal protections. Who knew? Linda tried calling me about 50 times that weekend. I let every single call go to voicemail. The messages started out angry, then got desperate, then went back to angry. She kept insisting that they had rights, that they'd established residency, that they'd made improvements to the property. Bob left messages too, suddenly trying to be all reasonable and friendly. He suggested we could work out some kind of arrangement, where they'd pay me rent to stay. He even offered to pay back rent for the previous 8 months, which was hilarious since they'd never offered to pay a dime when they were trying to steal my house. Update. The comments are wild, and yes, some of you guessed what happened next. My in-laws tried one last desperate move that backfired spectacularly. Ready for the finale? What do you think they tried to do when they realized they were really about to lose everything? The next 3 weeks were absolutely chaotic. Linda and Bob tried everything they could think of to stay in the house. They called code enforcement, claiming I was an unfit landlord. They contacted the Better Business Bureau. They even tried to get my husband to divorce me and claim the house in a settlement. Nothing worked because everything I'd done was completely legal and above board. I owned the house fair and square, and they were just tenants who'd never paid rent. They finally moved out 2 days before the sheriff was scheduled to physically remove them, but not before trying one last petty revenge move. They tried to trash the place on their way out. Keyword, tried. See, I'd been smart enough to install security cameras after I bought the house. I had everything documented when they broke my bathroom mirror, put holes in the living room wall, and tried to steal my refrigerator. The security footage was beautiful evidence for the lawsuit I filed immediately after. Not only did I get compensation for the damages, but their attempt at destruction actually backfired because it proved they'd been acting in bad faith the entire time. The best part? Mrs. Chen had kept copies of all their attempts to go behind our backs, all their calls trying to steal the lease, and all their lies about being responsible tenants. When their insurance company found out they'd been trying to fraudulently claim residency and had intentionally damaged property, their claim for their original house got tied up in legal red tape for months. Meanwhile, my husband and I moved back into our house. Well, my house now. We repainted the walls they'd damaged, replaced the mirror, and I finally got to arrange my kitchen exactly how I wanted it again. I found my favorite coffee mug in their moving truck, by the way. They'd tried to steal it along with several other small items that didn't seem important. The police were very interested in that detail when I filed the theft report. 6 months later, I heard through the family grapevine that Linda and Bob were still living in some extended stay motel, this same kind Linda had suggested I should look into. Their insurance company had finally settled, but most of the money went to legal fees and paying back debts they'd racked up while trying to steal my house. They tried to reconcile with my husband a few times, acting like the whole thing was just a misunderstanding and that family should stick together. He shut that down real quick. He'd finally seen their true colors and realized how manipulative they'd been the entire time. These days, I'm living my best life in my own house. I've got my coffee mug back in its rightful place, my skincare routine is perfectly organized, and my Netflix queue doesn't get hijacked by anyone's weird documentary obsessions. Sometimes I still can't believe how it all played out. 8 months of them calling me a burden, trying to steal my home, and treating me like I was the problem. But in the end, their greed and manipulation backfired completely. The funniest part? They always said I wasn't mature enough to handle adult responsibilities. Well, I handled buying a house, evicting problem tenants, filing lawsuits, and dealing with insurance fraud. I'd say that's pretty adult of me. My advice to anyone dealing with toxic family members: documento everything, know your rights, and don't let anyone convince you that their bad behavior is somehow your fault. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people face the natural consequences of their own actions. I'm sipping my coffee from my favorite mug in my own kitchen, and life is good. Linda and Bob learned the hard way that you can't just steal someone's home and call them a burden for existing in their own space. And that, my friends, is how I went from being called a burden to being a homeowner who evicted the people trying to steal from me. Sometimes karma doesn't need any help. It just needs good documentation and a solid legal strategy. The house is mine, the toxic in-laws are gone, and I finally got my feng shui back the way I actually like it. Bob would hate the new arrangement, and honestly, that makes it even better.